Good evening. As the councilwoman indicated, what I intend to do this evening is walk you through at a very high level some of the issues surrounding the current development of the 2013 and 14 budget, give you a little historical perspective, talk to you about the current budget that we're currently involved in, and then share with you some of the challenges that we've got going forward to deal with as it relates to the city's budget. Then ultimately receive your input this evening. And as the councilwoman said, we are going to do this 9 more times before we get into the development of the budget. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to try to make this as brief as possible. I know you didn't spend all day waiting for a long, lengthy presentation, so I will try to cover many of the things in it. I think you have the handouts in front of you, so I will probably not delve too far into it. What we're going to cover tonight is our budget development process, and we have coined the phrase in this current process as back to the basics. We're going to review a summary of the city budget, expenditures and revenue sources, also talk about the 2012 budget and some of its major components, and then talk to you a little bit about the current process we're going through to develop the current biennium budget that begins January 1st. Back to the basics. Fundamentally resolves around the 3 C's. If any of you have heard me speak, I typically like to use 3 different things to get a very concise message across. And we're going to go back to core services in this current biennium, continuous improvement, and credibility. The continuous improvement piece is related specifically to how we can refine our systems, streamline how we do things to be a better interface to the community, and find better and smarter ways to do things with limited resources. The credibility piece speaks to us being able to demonstrate through metrics and performance standards where our dollars go to ensure that we're spending the dollars wisely in these tough economic times. And the core services is trying to share with the community what we do on a daily basis and bring that back to what is tried and true the city should be responsible for, and working with our partners in many cases to figure out where they can pick up the slack as it relates to the things that we may be doing now that we might not be able to do in the future as it relates to the limited resources that we have. So your city budget at a high level glance, the 2011-2012 adopted budget. The total consolidated budget, which includes TPU, is $2.73 billion, of which $1.4 billion is related to utilities and other enterprise funds. $546 million is related to internal service funds and trust funds. $349 million is related to special revenue, debt, and capital. And the general fund, which we'll spend the most time this evening speaking of, in which all of the services that you come to know that we provide, that you depend on, from police, fire, public works, streets and grounds, and those matters, all are funded by our general fund, and that budget is $398.6 million. Of the utilities, that $1.4 billion, again, I just wanted to show you at a very high level what is included in those categories. The largest, obviously, is TPU, Power, and Click, which is $787 million of that 1.4. The next largest is water, wastewater, and surface water at $223 million, and Tacoma Water at $159 million, and solid waste at $145 million. And then there are various other small enterprise funds that make up the balance of the $1.4 billion. Internal service funds, we don't spend a lot of time talking about these funds, but these are the funds that support the general fund operations as well as many of the overhead services that you see in our utilities. It funds and is supported with our healthcare and benefits and retirement fund, our finance division, which provides services throughout our whole organization. Information technologies, fleet facilities, our radio and self-insurance funds are found in our internal service funds and trust funds at $546 million. Special revenue and debt and capital funds, again, on the screen you'll see streets and right-of-way, and we'll touch a little bit on our streets funds as a breakout of our public works budget. Fire and EMS is included in this area, building and land use, and our permitting functions. Then we have other special grants and other specific special purpose funds that we are dedicating resources to that can only be used for those purposes. And then our debt and capital funds are located in this particular category at $349 million. Our general fund, which I indicated are the services that you are most accustomed to hearing us talk about. You see police, fire, public works, library, our human rights and human services for those who are acronym challenged like I am. Our community and economic development division at $3.2 million and other, which is a compilation of a lot of our non-departmental funding, bigger contracts that don't really tie directly to any of our departments, you'll see there. But if you look at this slide and you'll hear later, police and fire make up about 61% of our overall funding in the general fund. And you'll see that depicted in a pie chart here, which brings a little bit more context to those numbers. Police and fire at $142 million, and fire at $101, and public works is the next largest, which is 8% of our budget. So that is how our expenditures in the general fund in this current biennium are spread out amongst the categories that you're most familiar with seeing. From a revenue perspective, there are three primary revenue sources that we count on, actually four. Property taxes, which is the largest, followed by utility taxes, sales tax, and business tax make up our big four of revenue sources. And then we have other miscellaneous revenues that comprise our general fund budget. And as you can imagine, when you hear about the deficits that we're projecting in the future, if you look at the main sources of revenue, short of the utility tax, property tax and sales tax, as well as business tax, have been hit significantly due to this recession. And so we are projecting very little growth in those areas. And you will see that has helped add to our issues with funding going forward. To put it in perspective, we created this chart to share with you the levy and where your tax dollars go. I think in many cases, people lose perspective when they write one check on an annual basis. They assume, in some cases, short of people who know the tax system really well, they assume to get all the services that they think they're paying for, police, fire, libraries, cross-jurisdictional things. In many cases, they don't see the different municipalities. They just see government. And they write a check and they expect a lot of things from those checks. And so what you see here, based on the levy that is the aggregate levy that you see throughout the county at $15 per 1,000, the city only receives about 23% of that levy. And the rest goes to the school system, Pierce County, the state, metro parks, and the other small taxing authorities. So we wanted to really share with you where your tax dollars go. And obviously, as in most cities, the predominant amount goes to the school system. And so the city is but a small piece of your overall tax bill. And we wanted to provide that as a perspective as well. If you see, we give an example of on a $200,000 home that you pay about $3,000 in taxes. And of that, only about 23% of that ends up going to the city. We have coined this the wheel of reality. And so as you begin to look, we talked about the expenditure side of our budget, and you can see where police and fire, public works and libraries and community and economic development and other services add up. In the middle of our wheel, if you look around the outside of our wheel, you'll see where our revenues go. And so as you can see from that, when you look at, and we try to bring this into perspective, police and fire alone, when it comes to where we put our dollars and our core services, they make up and account for more than the property tax and sales tax combined, and almost 3/4 of our business occupational tax when it comes to the amount of dollars we spend on a biennium for those services. And so I think that is a really telling chart as it relates to, is the city spending the tax dollars that we send you in the right areas? And I would say, yes, we are. And I think they're primarily driven by police and fire and public works when you look at that as it relates to how much we spend from the general fund on public works. More specifically, some of the major programs, and the councilwoman alluded to an exercise we just went through with the city council last Tuesday, where we asked them to take a fictional $10 amount and put it into $8.50 as it relates to providing services with shortening and lesser resources. They were very good in doing that. I know it was a difficult task. I think they enjoyed the exercise. It actually shared with them how difficult this next budget process is going to be. And I believe they are hopeful that we'll, one, do a wonderful job of providing a budget that's reflective of what they share with us. In addition, these public input meetings are going to add more input and information for staff to go and develop a budget when we hear from you later on and throughout this whole process. But one of the things we had them do was rate about 8 different services in that $10 amount and put it back in the budget. In addition, as the councilwoman indicated, we had 39 different program areas that we asked them to rate for us on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being they would be willing to eliminate the programs, 2 was that they would be willing to take reductions in those areas, and 3 was to maintain the current services, and 4 was to add resources to fund the service that they deemed that needed more funding to get to the level that they wanted. And they went through 39 different categories and provided that guidance. That particular document is out on our website for your review. Again, it was an exercise for staff to be able to see where they were willing to make reductions. I wanted to just touch on about 3 of the major services and share with you some perspective as it relates to the budget so that you can see where we were 4 years ago to 5 years ago and where we are today, from budget to staffing, and where those dollars go. In the area of our police department, what you'll see on this chart is where we've grown and spent dollars over the last several bienniums. You'll see back in 2007 and 2008, we were spending $136 million a biennium. And at that point, we had a full-time equivalent in police officers in the entire department at 433. That obviously went up in 2009 and 2010. The current adopted budget was $142.7 million, and the current budget, given changes and things that we've reallocated around, is actually at $142.9 million. And they actually have 409 positions today. And so as you have seen over the last several months, and with the first round of budget reductions, the drop-off in positions is primarily related to vacant positions that are no longer in the department. That did not result in layoffs, but it was a capturing of vacant positions and dollars to add back in to help close the gap in 2012. The next slide is the police department's budget, the whole $142 million spread out as it relates to the various categories of services. As you can see, the bulk of their budget is labor alone, and labor alone is 45%. You factor in overtime and the other benefits, and you can see that it consumes primarily all of their budget. Obviously, it's a very labor-intensive organization, but you also should note that $14.2 million is spent on our jail. And so we'll be looking at ways to work with the court system to figure out how, in fact, we can get at those costs over this next biennium. And there's $15 million that's provided to Lisa to provide our dispatching and our support services there. So that reflects where the city's dollars go when it comes to our police department. Fire department, another major department. Again, same historical perspective. 2007, 2008, we were at $89 million a biennium. We have grown slightly through ups and downs in 2011 and 2012 current budget to $93.8 million. And we have a staffing level of 420 firefighters and other personnel. Again, that reduction from the adopted to where we are currently was related to vacancies being removed from the budget as a part of the first round of budget exercise and our cuts. And again, depicting the fire department's overall costs and the categories and breakdowns there. Again, they are increasingly at a different level than the police department on labor when it comes to their regular salaries and labor benefits and overtime. Very small amounts of fixed costs and M&O and assessments. The EMS function is not in this budget. It is in a separate fund, and it's supported also by a levy of 0.5 that you saw on a previous chart, in addition to the other fees and things that support that particular area. But this is the general fund at $93.8 million in our fire department. Public Works, $28 million in the biennium. As you can see, a predominant amount of that is transferred to the street fund to support our maintenance and activities associated with engineering and other matters like that. And I'll have a breakout slide later, but that is primarily a labor cost in Public Works with a big chunk 18.5 going to our streets funds to support our street maintenance activities. The 2013 and 14 budget, we have spent quite a bit of time talking about 2012's budget, and we are soon to resolve that. I don't know if you have read the paper over the last several days. We've had some good news in the paper. On Friday, we were awarded a SAFER grant in the amount of $7.7 million, I believe, to fund some firefighters over a 2-year period. And so we're happy about that. Today we received notice that we received a community-oriented policing grant for $4.9 million or 15 community policing related officers for 3 years worth of funding. So that will help us as we begin to try to deal with some of the structural issues that we'll talk about very briefly in the remaining portions of this presentation. But we are excited about that. We look forward to working with the police department and fire department, as well as the labor unions that represent the employees in those particular departments, to find ways to further bring about some efficiencies and deal with what we believe is a significant structural issue as it relates to our budget going forward, given our limited resources. So I am hopeful that we'll be able to work with those groups to deal with the challenging things that we've got going forward. As it relates to the general fund forecast summary, as the councilwoman has alluded and has been much reported, the current deficit or shortfalls that we are looking at trying to resolve for 2013 and 14 are $60 to $65 million over the next biennium. If in fact we don't make structural improvements to bring that budget into balance with things that are recurring, we're looking at $80 to $85 million in the 2015 and 2016 biennium. Now, from an academic perspective, I think the 2015 and 16 reflection of $80 to $85 million is an accurate one. In reality, we're going to make efforts to solve 2013 and 14 with recurring structural changes so that those future increases will be much smaller, in the $3 to $5 million range going into 14, and in 15 and 16 probably in somewhere between the $5 and $8 million, which will be primarily driven by some of our labor agreements and contracts. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to address those with some structural changes that don't allow for us to have so many large gaping holes in our budget going forward. We're going to spend a great deal of time over these next several weeks and months working with the departments, with the employees, receiving input from the council, the community, as well as our employees on how we can fix parts of our budget, figure out things that we need to stop doing that just don't make a lot of sense. And I'm not talking about programmatically. I'm talking about processes and things that are just outdated, that no longer stand the test of time and should be done here, that may be out of kilter with what other local governments are doing and really what we should or should not be doing. And so I'll spend a lot of time over the next several months with my department directors finding those type of solutions, not the easy fixes such as we just need to cut 5, 10 positions here and there. We need to get smarter about the way we do things, because I don't believe that the community is willing to accept less services unless we can demonstrate why that's the need for less services. And we've done everything that we can do possibly to bring about efficiencies to keep and preserve the services that they get today. So we'll be challenged to do that, but I am looking forward to working with the departments and the council to do that. What I wanted to share was the budget will, and I will thank the councilman in the back, Councilman David Bowe, who encouraged us to provide that similar will and scenario showing the missing link. And so you see the $63 million gap, and we refer to it as a flat tire. And so we are hopeful to fill that gap, but again, as you see from the projections as we move forward, because of the estimated increases in some of our police and fire areas, you can see that now they actually consume all of the business tax, sales tax, and property tax in and of itself that we're estimating. So when you ask where the predominant amount of our resources go, when people ask you, are we looking in the right places and are we funding the right things, you can tell them yes, and we hope to make sure we can communicate that to people. But we're going to do better and find ways to mitigate a lot of that gap through efficiencies and find ways to deliver high quality service in the areas where we need to be delivering services at. Major service areas again, and I think we'll hear from many people tonight and over the next several weeks about many of these services in this area that may be I guess, near and dear to your hearts. And we would love to hear from you and are looking forward to hearing from you on any specific area, anything that you can add of value to us, and it will be of value to you, so it's of value to us, that we want to hear from you across all of our service areas, and our departments are here to take that, and you will see many people taking notes. They'll be typing, and we will report out all the things we've heard across the city as it relates to suggestions, improvements, and wants, and don't wants in some respect, at the end of this process. Again, we're going to go back to the basics, focus on core services, continuous improvement, and building the credibility necessary to make sure that citizens respect what we're doing with their tax dollars and that they know we're spending it wisely, we're spending it on services that they care about, and we're doing it within budget and within the things that we've been given as resources. And lastly, as it relates to the civic engagement piece, this is the first step in our community input. We will have surveys, which I think you may have been handed when you came in. We're asking people who are in attendance and those from afar the opportunity to rank the services in your level in order of priority. You don't have to do it now. There will be boxes, I'm assuming, throughout all of our libraries and other public institutions, and/or you can fill it out online and submit that. There can be open-ended comments if, in fact, you're not comfortable sharing tonight any of your input. And those things will go on, at least the rankings and questionnaires will go on through the month of August, and then the budget input box will go on throughout the entire budget process. One thing I will note that is not on here, this is, again, the beginning. Once, in fact, we submit a proposed budget to the City Council on October 2nd, following 2 or 3 weeks after that particular process, one, we'll be meeting with Council to walk them through the budget, get their input and guidance. We will be coming back out to the community and we'll present, one, a budget video, and we'll offer the same opportunity to go through the budget, and we'll walk through the budget in a little bit more detail with the community to tell you what's in it, what's not in it, what changes are going to happen as it relates to service levels, what is going to be added from an improvement standpoint, because we're hopeful to redirect some resources to get into those areas that we really need to be spending more effort on. We're going to come back with a video hosted by council members again, and I'll be up again very briefly at that point. And then we're going to see if we got it right. And we're going to ask for input from the community again to see what's in the budget that they feel is missing, and or if we got it right. So we're hopeful that we hear from you now. We'll come back in October and share with you what's in the budget. We'll hear from you again, and we'll get that process right as we go forward with adoption sometime in November and December. So I want to thank everyone who took the time to come out tonight to share with us and to listen to our presentation and provide input. I want to thank staff for their hard work in developing a process that will allow for this input, and the councilwoman and councilman for their attendance tonight. So with that, we are adjourned, and thank you, and drive home safely. And again, thank you for coming out.